be talking a little bit more about that later. And so there's going to be a lot we're going to be going over tonight. So this is going to be more of an introduction to hemp, and we're going to try to stay more general and not get into too much technicality, but we will be covering a lot of different aspects, and those should all serve as great launching points for doing your own research. We're going to be discussing a brief general history of hemp. I'm going to get on to the next slide here. So we're going to discuss the history of hemp mixes, and then we're going to, the second half of the class, talk about how we actually cultivate the plant and process it, and then we're going to look at our line of cannabinoid-rich hemp products. So I am going to turn my video off, but you'll be able to hear my voice throughout the class. As Jennifer mentioned, if you have any questions, if you could submit them in the chat, and we'll try to get to that at the end of class. If it's a really pressing question, Jennifer should be able to relay that to me, but let's save the question answer section for the end. And I'm going to turn my video off here. You should still be able to hear my voice and see the presentation. So let's see here. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. All right, so like I said, we're going to do a brief overview of hemp, talk about its definition and how it's defined. We're going to look at the historical range, its botany and agronomy, traditional and contemporary uses of it. We're going to discuss the endocannabinoid system and what cannabinoids are, and we're going to talk a little bit about US regulations regarding hemp in Wisconsin, where our farm is, but also in Minnesota. So moving along right away with the definition of hemp, what you guys see on the screen here is the official definition. So let's read it. The term hemp means the plant Cannabis sativa and any part of that plant, including the seeds thereof and all derivatives, extracts, cannabinoids, isomers, acids, salts, and salts of isomers, whether growing or not, with a delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, THC, concentration of not more than 1/3 of 1% on a dry weight basis. So that's a lot of words, but what we're basically getting at with this definition is that hemp is really the same plant as marijuana. They're both cannabis sativa, and cannabis, the only distinction that makes hemp different from marijuana is that crucial percentage that's bolded, the THC percentage of below 0.3%. So if a plant is above 0.3% on a dry weight basis, then it would fall into the category of marijuana. Under that, it's hemp. So really what we're looking at is in some ways just a socially constructed definition. And it's a percent that in other countries looks different. Some countries it's a little higher, which is a little bit more farmer friendly, because growing hemp at such a low percentage can be difficult, and it can go over sometimes. But in other countries, it's even lower than 0.3, and some it's 0.2%. So that's where we're starting with our definition of hemp and cannabis. We're gonna move along here. So on this next slide, you guys are looking at a map of the postulated routes that hemp has moved across the world over time. And so when we talk about hemp and cannabis, we're really talking about three main subspecies that you can see here: sativa, indica, ruderalis. We're going to go back to this map, but the sativa and indica are native to Central Asia, and then the ruderalis is native to Northern Europe and Siberia. And Cannabis sativa and indica are the more well-known species of cannabis. And as you can see on this map, it was first domesticated between 10 to 12,000 years ago in Central Asia, and then made its migration through the Middle East and into Africa, into Europe. And as early as the 1500s, it's been said that it was brought from the Spanish to Chile in South America. And then there's even some postulation that there may have been native species of hemp in the Americas. But at this point in time, there are a wide variety of different hybrids and cultivars all around the world. And breeding is bringing about new cultivars every year. Let's move on and talk about the botany of those species. So here we are, we're looking at three main species: Cannabis sativa, Cannabis indica, and Cannabis ruderalis. So let's see here. Cannabis is they all have petalless flowers, and the plants are considered to be dioecious, meaning that they're primarily either male or female, and that their flowers are either male or female, although hermaphrodite plants can exist. And as you can see here, the sativa species is a much taller plant. It has more slender leaves, and is and thrives in more hotter climates, and and has a longer flowering period. Moving on to the indica, that plant is more cold hardy, although it also has a longer photo period for its flowering. And as you can see, it's a shorter and stouter plant with broader leaves. And then the ruderalis plant is the one that's native to Siberia and Northern Europe. And it's a really tiny plant. It only has a lifespan of about 90 to 100 days in the wild. And so it's a really short season plant. And it's what's known as an autoflower or a day neutral plant, which means that it initiates its flowering irregardless of light cycle changes. So whatever the light is in Siberia in the middle of the summertime, where it might be 20 hours of daylight, the plant knows to start going into flower mode and finish all within about 90 days, only 3 months, which is really quick. Whereas the sativa and indica plants can take 6, 7, even 8 months to go from seed to fully mature flowers. And those plants are what are known as photoperiod plants, which means that they may not start flowering until daylight dips below 15 hours a day. So in reality, most plants, like I mentioned earlier, are hybrids. So they're hybrids of sativa and indica. And they're, like I mentioned, ruderalis is also known as autoflower because it automatically goes into flower irregardless of the day length. And so one of the species, or one of the varieties that we grew on our farm this year, was actually had genetics of all three. So it had the early flowering quality of the ruderalis, but it also had the desirable traits of the sativa and indica. So that's a pretty cool type of plant, especially for growing in northern Wisconsin, where we have a much shorter growing season than other parts of the country. Let's move along here. As you can see here, we get more of a close-up of the leaves. You can see the multiple leaflets and serrated edges that are typical and iconic of cannabis. The female plant is the plant that is most associated with the flower buds that that you get with hemp. And so it's the female flowers that are actually being grown for the cannabinoids that we'll be talking about later. The male plants produce their own flowers and pollen, and when the pollen gets introduced to the female plants, they will basically put on a heavy set of seeds. So hemp is mainly grown for 3 categories. There's cannabinoids like CBD and other ones like CBG, which we'll talk about later. But hemp is also grown, as you guys know, for its fiber, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly as well. So that has all sorts of applications with textiles. And then it's also grown for its seeds for both animal feed and human feed, for its high protein and also fatty, oily seeds that it produces. So so when farmers are growing hemp for seed and fiber, they're choosing cultivars that can be male and female. They don't care if there's cross pollination. They want the plants really tall and dense, so they're planted several per square feet. So the plants end up growing 12 to 15 feet tall, and then they're loaded with seeds, or they have really long stalks that can then be processed into the different fiber applications. Whereas farmers that are growing hemp for their cannabinoids are growing them only the female plants, and so the ones that we grow on our farm are pre-selected to be feminized, so they're bred to be feminized. And they are also there's some that are called triploid, with triploid genetics, which are not only feminized flower buds so that they produce the most amount of cannabinoids without pollination from males, but if there happens to be accidental pollination, they will not even accept it, and so they will still produce a cannabinoid-rich yield. So let's move on to the next slide. This is a really cool close shot, probably 50 times the magnification, looking at the outer coating of the resinous flowers. So we have the pictures of they're known as trichomes, and it's the resinous, these glandular sacs that you see on top, almost like a mushroom. And it's the ball on top that you see that has the cannabinoids that we're after. You can also see the colors on the plant material itself. And so besides just the cannabinoids that are present on this plant outer surface, there's also terpenes and flavonoids. And so the color is an indication of the flavonoids. The terpenes are the aromas that give the plants their unique smell. And terpenes also add to the modulating effect of the cannabinoids. So like I mentioned earlier, people are growing hemp for cannabinoid, for therapeutic value for humans and animals, but also are growing it for the fiber and the edible value of it. And so I found some pretty cool applications of it that you can see here in this slide. We have hemp twine. So that's like a really traditional use. For centuries, hemp has been used for cordage and twine and rope, and has been really important in in shipping and all that. Let's see here. We also have in this picture The bricks are known as Hemp Crete, which is a really cool new product made from the processed fiber from the hemp, and it's basically breathable, insulative, and mold resistant, and also structurally has structural integrity. And so it's a really cool product that is used in all sorts of construction purposes in recent times, and is showing a lot of promise as a really neat, sustainable building material. They're lightweight and easy to work with. And then on the bottom there, you can see a container made with hemp plastic. So the resins and oils from the seeds can actually be spun and synthesized into bioplastics. And so it's another neat application. Here is a kind of a fun picture of a Ford car that was built in 1941, and it was made out of bioplastics, the whole outer shell of the car. So hemp was part of it, as well as flax, wheat, and soy. So it's multiple agricultural inputs that went into the bioplastic for this car as early as 1941. It turned out to be a really strong outer shell for the car, which is kind of neat, and lightweight. But what's also cool about this car is that it was actually designed to run on hemp biofuel. So using hemp as an engine fuel for the car. So that's yet another neat way to that hemp has been used and is still being used nowadays. And so you can see the date here is 1941 when this product was introduced. Turns out that after World War II, as steel became cheaper again after the war, they ended up ditching these bioplastics in favor of the metal. So I thought that was interesting. Here's another use for it, textiles. So there's shoes being made with hemp fiber. There's pants and jackets and clothes. The seeds are also used as a delicious and nutritious, high protein and also fatty food and grain. So you can see that the seeds can be powdered, they can be shelled. There's hemp hearts that you can find at Whole Foods Co-op. In the back there of the picture, you can see a little dish with hemp seed oil. So it's oil pressed from the seed. It's a delicious liquid cold pressed oil that can be used in salad dressings and has a very favorable omega-3 and omega-6 profile. There's hemp seed protein bars, which are really digestible way to enjoy eating hemp compared to other protein bars out there. And then there's hemp seed milk. So again, it's kind of in the genre of your oat milks and soy milks, but this time is blended with the hemp seeds, which are really creamy and fatty. And then they strain out the shell and any kind of fibrous pulp, and then you're left with that rich, creamy hemp milk. So you guys can also find that at Whole Foods Co-op. So let's move along now to discussing cannabinoids. We talked a little bit about the textiles and fiber and grains and seeds, but then again, the other category is hemp being grown for its therapeutic value. So of course, you know, as we discussed earlier, the distinction of hemp and marijuana is the amount of THC. And so hemp has also does have a small amount of THC, but there's so many other cannabinoids in hemp that right now there's over 112 different recognized cannabinoids that can be present in hemp, and all of them have different interactions with the human body, and many of them have significant therapeutic value. But just to back up a little bit, the reason why cannabinoids are important is that as humans and mammals, we have what are known as endocannabinoid systems. And basically, the endocannabinoid system regulates and harmonizes many bodily systems via a network of cannabinoid receptors that are found all across the body. Primarily CB1 and CB2 are the main receptors. And so we actually produce endogenous cannabinoids in our own, internally through through dietary fats that we ingest, which then create the endocannabinoids, which are lipid-based neurotransmitters. And so we have two main endogenous ones. One of them is called anandamide, and the other one is, it's kind of a mouthful, so we'll call it 2-AG. And those are the two main endocannabinoids that our bodies naturally produce. So basically, the endocannabinoid system is mediating the pharmacological effects of cannabis by satisfying the different receptors. And so consuming cannabinoids externally is basically helping to feed our own endocannabinoid system and keep it in harmony and balance, and finding that balance between the various organ systems. So it promotes a fundamentally homeostatic state with lower inflammation. And even though we make our own endocannabinoids endogenously, there is reason to believe that many people don't make enough of these. So external sources like cannabis, which is the most concentrated and readily available source of external phytocannabinoids, plant-based cannabinoids, is important to help restore any kind of balance. And even from day to day, our endocannabinoid systems fluctuate. So again, bringing these external cannabinoids can help to promote that harmonious balance between our various organ systems and promote with homeostasis and decreased inflammation. And so Cbg and Cbd are two really important therapeutic cannabinoids that are found in significant amounts in hemp. And so the different strains of hemp flowers that we grow on our farm are rich in both Cbg and Cbd. And what's interesting about Cbg is, CBD has gotten a lot of attention in recent years, but Cbg is starting to get a lot more attention itself. It's known as the mother of all cannabinoids because it's what's in the plants early on and is almost like a stem cell or template for building other cannabinoids. So CBD and THC are both derived out of CBG. So you can see this image here, the similarity of them, of the two cannabinoids. And then going back to the discussing the CB1 and CB2 receptors and how CBD interacts with those and CBG. CBD interacts indirectly with these two systems, but it stimulates the endocannabinoid system to produce its own natural cannabinoids, and it also inhibits the breakdown of them so they can stay around in the body longer. With CBG, it does interact with CB1 and CB2 receptors, but more weakly, not as strong. And but it does increase the body's endogenous anandamide, which is one of our own endocannabinoids. And that's involved in pain, depression, appetite, and memory. CBG is also a potent agonist for 2-AG, which is the other endocannabinoid that we produce. And so that may help reduce stress, decrease anger, and lower blood pressure, as well as improve working memory and executive function. And CBG has also been found to interact with a number of receptors implicated in pain and inflammation, as well as mood control and depression. And so I have a little chart that I found here that was put together by some folks, and it's based on published scientific studies and what they indicate are potential uses for CBD and CBG. So as far as Northwoods Botanicals brand, we're hesitant to make any medical claims on our products, but this chart is interesting in that it can show that it shows what CBD and CBG can be indicated for. And you know, there's really so much that we don't know about cannabinoids and how they interact with our body. It's and the thing is, like, each person is different, and so we everybody is different, and we're even different from day to day. So when we're using hemp products, it's really important to really listen to your body. We suggest starting low and slow just to see how it interacts with you, and to find your own dosing by kind of starting low, but you can increase it. You might want to try using it once a day in the morning, but then you might realize you want to try in the morning and the evening, or take twice as much. So it's really important to sort of dial that in. But you know, there have been thousands of years of human use. It's a really safe plant, but bottom line is there's a lot more that science has to uncover about these cannabinoids and their properties. Let's move along here. So going back a little bit on about the history of cannabis in the United States, we saw that it made it into the Americas in the 1500s, and then as early as the 1600s and into the 1700s in what has become the United States, laws actually made it mandatory for farmers to grow hemp. Early on, it also had the support of presidents and was promoted into the 1800s. There was new hemp technologies like decortication, which allowed more convenient processing of the hemp stalks into different fiber purposes. And also into the 1800s, cannabis was used for its therapeutic properties. And so this is kind of a fun ad that you can see here, a little advertisement for a cannabis tincture, probably from the late 1800s. Here's a picture of some workers for the Fairwater Hemp Company in Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin and Minnesota, the history of hemp goes way back. It became more of an industrial crop in Minnesota in the early 1910s, and was aided with federal promotion, purchasing, and price supports. In Minnesota, it was active, the hemp industry, at least up through the 1940s, when there were still hundreds of acres being grown in the state, and it was mostly for fiber and grains. In 1937, Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, which heavily taxed and regulated anyone growing or manufacturing hemp, and they didn't distinguish between hemp or marijuana. So it was driven by the timber industry, lobbyists, and fossil fuel plastics basically, it was driven by the timber industry, lobbyists, and the fossil fuel industry that was making plastics out of fossil fuels. And so despite that pushback and the extra tax and regulations, hemp was still being used throughout World War II for rope and fiber. Then in the 1970s, there's complete prohibition on hemp, as it was officially defined as marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act, which claimed that cannabis was of zero medicinal value and had a high risk of addiction. And despite all the industrial applications and research showing hemp varieties are different than high THC varieties, the Controlled Substances Act was still passed. As hemp was illegal for decades, there's a big explosion in synthetic materials that hemp could have replaced. And then finally, in 2014, all those years later, Congress passed the Farm Bill, which allowed for hemp growing in certain circumstances in states with trial programs. And then Minnesota started its hemp pilot program in 2015, allowing hemp to be legally grown in Minnesota for the first time since the 1950s. And then there was more deregulation in 2018 with the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. So that's a lot of information there, you guys, on the history of hemp, its botany, and its interactions with the human endocannabinoid system. So I know we covered a lot of materials. I'm just really passionate about the plant. I'm a farmer. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. And so I definitely encourage you guys to use any of these different items that we reviewed as good launching points for your own research. So we'll get to any questions that you guys have at the end during our Q&A. But let's move on to the next section of this class tonight. And we're going to talk about, I got a couple more slides. So that's decortication of the fiber. But we're going to now talk about how we grow hemp flowers on our farm in northern Wisconsin. We're about 60 miles to the east of Duluth. So we're right near Duluth. We're right on Lake Superior. And we've been growing hemp on our farm since 2019. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we do it and all the different steps and stages involved to process it, as well as getting to the products that we have. So here you guys can see our hemp license, an old one of our original old hemp licenses that we got. And I have included this in the slideshow because it's just indicative of all the paperwork and regulations that are involved, not just because the 2014 Farm Bill legalized hemp. To actually grow it, you have to register with your state's industrial hemp program, and there's all sorts of permits and licensing and paperwork involved, as well as researching of regulations. So that's kind of where it all starts. After you're all set up and registered and permitted and licensed, then the next most important thing is sourcing seeds from a reputable seed breeder, because what's really important when you're growing industrial hemp, again, is that you keep the cannabinoid content of THC under 0.3%. And so if you're buying seeds from a dealer that's not reputable, your plants have a more likely chance of testing quote unquote hot, which is where they test high in THC. And at that point, then you have to destroy the entire crop and all is lost. So it's really important early on to, dot your I's and cross your T's by sourcing those genetics that you can really rely on to produce not only bountiful and abundant plants and harvest, but also a harvest that will actually pass the inspection and pass that lab test. So let's move along here. So once we get the seeds, we sprout them usually in May in our greenhouse. And as you can see, we actually grow them from seed. There's some people that use clones of vegetative cuttings, but we find that growing from seed results in more vigorous plants. And there's less issues with importing any kind of diseases or pests that may come along with vegetative cuttings. Also, with the seeds here, we're growing them in a unique way that minimizes our use of plastic and those annoying garden trays, that those little flimsy plastic trays that can break really easily. So we're growing them in repurposed grocery trays that you can see here, and they're grown in little individual soil blocks that we press. So we press our soil mixture into these blocks. They almost look like little cakes, and they have a divot in the middle where we plant the seed. And we're going to move to this next up close one. You can see that the soil blocks help with what's known as air pruning. So because they don't have the confines of a plastic tray, the roots prune themselves more broadly across the entire block rather than sort of swirling around at the bottom. We also add mycorrhizae powder to our soil blocks, and mycorrhizae is a symbiotic fungus that interacts with the roots of cannabis as well as other garden plants. And it can actually help to basically increase the surface area of the roots. So it's a fungus that's trading sugars that it gets from the plant for bringing the plant water and nutrients and minerals. So we add that to our plants to also increase their vigor, because we use all natural farming practices. We want to use all of these advantages like the seeds and the mycorrhizae to our advantage with the natural farming practices. We'll move on here. So when we first started, we converted our big hayfield into this tillable soil that you see here. And we actually did that by pasture raising pigs on the land for one season. And so the pigs tilled up all the grass roots. And then the following season, we went through with our walk behind tiller to make the soil texture a little bit more fine. You can see that we made these raised beds. And then from that point on, the beds have never been tilled again. So we consider these to be permanent raised beds. And what's important about the raisedness of this is that it helps the plants to get water when they need it. They can go deep into the soil, but then they're also protected if it gets too wet in the season. And so this next picture here is what the garden looked like later on that season. So we used cardboard in between the pathways and did a thick layer of wood chips, and then we used composted on the actual rows. And so not only does that help to feed the plants, but it also keeps the soil protected and moist so it doesn't dry out and crack. And it also keeps the weeds down. So we're really big fans of deep mulching. It reduces our need for irrigation. We don't have that annoying plastic drip tubing all over. And it really works for our farm and our growing method. Moving along here. In the interest of keeping our plants, our farm all natural, we do not use any synthetic chemicals or fertilizers. And that's a picture of me in the early morning. And what I have on my backpack is it's a sprayer with aerated compost tea. So it's a compost tea that has undergone oxygenation and bubbling for about 24 hours. So it aerates the compost tea, and it basically helps to multiply different beneficial organisms, and it allows different nutrients to get applied to the leaves of the plant. So it's a foliar feeding. and we're spraying it underneath the leaves where they have their stomata opening. It's little openings where they can take in those nutrients that we're spraying, and the beneficial bacteria can interact with the surface of the leaf, and so that also helps protect the plants. So that's what we're doing in that photo. And then next up here, you can see the little lady beetle in the plants. And we are all about the beneficial insects. We love them. So again, our farm is a specialty crop farm. We actually grow over 120 different edible and medicinal plants on our farm. And all those 120 different species all have their own flowers and attract their own insects. And so we're all about the diversity, and having ladybugs coming in naturally to check on our hemp plants is really important, because in I believe it's 2017, Oregon was first in the States to get an invasive aphid from India called a cannabis aphid. And from 2017 to 2019, in just those 2 short years, it spread all the way from Oregon to Minnesota and Wisconsin. And so during our very first year of growing in 2019, our plants had these little cannabis aphids, and we tried different natural control methods. But what ended up really doing the most amount of work was the ladybugs that honed in on the aphids and pretty much walked up and down and had a buffet of aphids. And by the end of the season, there was almost no aphid on the plants to be found. So it's really cool. We love our beneficial insects. Here you can see that, it hasn't been said directly, but we do all of our growing outdoors. There's some folks that use plastic greenhouses and high tunnels. And while season extension has its place, we like to grow outdoors under the sun because it's so much lower energy. We get the natural rainfall, the natural lumens from the sun, and all the nutrition in our living soil. So we do feel like that adds to the overall quality of our flowers, and that translates into the products that we make with them. Here's my wife doing an inspection of the hemp flowers with a little magnifier. And what she's looking at are those trichomes that we saw earlier on in the presentation. It's that slide that I showed you guys that was a close-up of a flower, and it had the resin glands that look like little mushrooms. And so those are the trichomes. And so she's inspecting the trichomes because they have an evolution of starting off crystal clear, and then as they become more mature and full of cannabinoids and terpenes, they'll become cloudy and eventually amber. You're looking to harvest when the plants are a mix of cloudy or milky and that amber. And so that's what she's looking at there. And so around 3 to 4 weeks before your anticipated harvest, you are in both Minnesota and Wisconsin required to contact the Department of Agriculture. And then they come out to your farm and they'll walk the rows and collect samples of each strain that you're growing. And so they snip off the top 8 inches of the flower buds and will submit them to their state laboratory for analysis. And when it comes back that it's low in THC, then then now your product is harvestable and you can have a fit for commerce certification, which allows you to then use your hemp harvest for commerce. And so that is that's all the result of a inspection. And so here's a really nice picture of one of our flowers up close. This is one of our CBG rich strains. And I realized that earlier on, I didn't give the full name for CBG. CBG is just an acronym, but it's short for cannabigerol. And then CBD is short for cannabidiol. So this flower is a breed that's called white CBG, and it's bred to be very rich in CBG. And then there's our cute little cat, and then there's a beautiful trichome rich flower top, and this is a CBD rich flower. So this strain is called sour RNA, and you can see that the flower bud almost looks frosty, and that's a result of all those tiny little mushroom shaped trichomes, which contain the cannabinoids and terpenes that we're after. Moving along, here's one more cool picture. Is from a strain that we grew this fall, and it's new. It's a CBD rich strain, and it's called Elektra. It's kind of fun, and it had nice purple colored leaves and really rich smell. Here's my wife Owen again, helping with the harvest. So we hand harvest all of our plants after they've passed the inspection, and then when they're at that right maturity. And so we are harvesting the plants with clippers, cutting off branches and entire plants depending on the size. And we delicately transport them to our drying shed that we rent in the neighborhood. And that's what we'll go into here. So there's one of our friends, Nathaniel, helping to dry the branches. And so we dry them in our drying shed, and we strive to keep the conditions dark and the moisture in the range of between 50 to 60% humidity, and also the temperatures around 60 to 70. So there's a little bit of playing with environmental controls. We have multiple fans in there and a lot of airflow. And so the goal is to dry the plants properly and thoroughly, but you don't want to dry them too fast. It's important that they have a long and slow cure. And this long and slow drying and curing allows for enzymatic breakdown of some of the grassy and bitter chlorophylls, as well as it can even help to develop the cannabinoid composition and ultimately make for a smoothing out of the product. And so there's a little window into our drying process and curing. And here you can see 5-gallon buckets with those spinnable gamma lids you can spin on and off. And that's where we keep our flower tops that we use for hand trimmed flower and that we want to treat even more specially. So going back to this top slide, a lot of this plant material will actually get separated from the stalk when it's fully dried. And that's what we bring to our processor for an extraction. So once the flowers and leaves have been stripped off of the branches, it's known as your biomass. And so the biomass is what we extract and is what we get processed into our extract, which goes into our products. But here is buckets that are filled with the flowers themselves as a hand trimmed flower product. So here's a photo of the facility where our biomass gets processed. We work with some great folks in St. Paul that have a small processing company, and they have amazing state-of-the-art equipment. So what you see here is a chamber where the flowers get stuffed into the mesh basket there, and then dunked into a 100% pure food grade ethanol alcohol solution. So it's pure alcohol, and it's also cryoethanol. The cryo meaning that it's at ridiculously cold temperatures of minus 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the flowers are submerged in the ice cold alcohol solution, and then they're strained out. And then at that point, all those trichomes and resins have now dissolved into the alcohol solution. And what's left over is that spent biomass. So it's spent because it's basically been stripped of the desirable cannabinoids and terpenes. And so now that biomass, we pick that up from our processors, and that gets composted into our garden, and so that becomes mulch for future gardening. So that's what we do with our spent biomass. And then the alcohol solution with the cannabinoids then gets recaptured. So they're actually able to gently evaporate the alcohol. And what's left is the full spectrum extract of the cannabinoids and terpenes that are most desirable. So you're left with a dark, full spectrum hemp flower extract. And then that extract then gets spun around in these beakers that you see on the table here. And when you're starting with the extract, it's considered a raw extract. And not to get too nerdy on the cannabis science of the cannabinoids, but basically CBD and CBG, for example, start off as CBDA and CBGA, which is basically the A stands for an acid group. And so the raw CBDA gets heat treated through a process known as decarboxylation. And that heat treatment converts the raw CBDA into its activated CBD version. So that's the long and short of it, but that process is known as decarboxylation. It's actually what happens when people smoke hemp flowers. Is as you're burning the flower, the heat of the burning is actually decarboxylating the cannabinoids right then and there. And then and then there's also folks that will use hemp flowers and bake them in their oven to decarboxylate the hemp flowers that way. And then you can quote unquote activate your hemp flower by baking it in your oven at a certain temperature and for a certain amount of time. And then that enables you to then use your activated hemp flower in a brownie mix, or in sprinkling it on a pizza and eating it that way. So that heat treatment is called decarboxylation. And so in this image here, these beakers swirl around that thick, dark, full spectrum extract, and then it fully decarboxylates it, and it gets rid of any residual alcohol. We get our extract back. As we're formulating our products, we are getting certificates of analysis at every step of the way. And the certificate of analysis shows the cannabinoid composition, and and so you can see here there's a lot of detail. I'm not sure how clear it is on everyone's screen, but there's different metrics that are indicated, and it's by percentage as well as milligrams per serving. So that all indicates the amount of cannabinoids that are in our products, so that we can make accurate claims as to how many milligrams are in a given bottle of our tincture, for example. So that's the certificate of analysis. It's really important to look for when you're purchasing hemp and CBD products. So you guys saw the whole transformation from seed to flower to harvest to processing. And then that extract then finally gets mixed into our tinctures. So here's a really nice picture of our strawberry lemonade CBD tincture. And each bottle that's shown here has I guess it looks like on the left, it says 500 milligrams in that bottle. And on the right, it's 1,000 milligrams of CBD in that bottle. So there's more of the extract in it. So it's twice as concentrated. And each bottle has about 30 servings. And so this is one of our favorite ways to consume hemp because it's so effective in terms of its bioavailability, because it's a tincture, and we have used MCT oil as the carrier oil. It's really absorbable in the human body, and we also use sunflower lecithin, which is an emulsifier, so that also helps the fat-based cannabinoids absorb into the watery membrane of our body more easily, so that more of the cannabinoids are absorbed. So it's a really great oil-based tincture, and we have different flavors of it. So this is strawberry lemonade. We also have mint and cinnamon and orange and classic. And you can find our CBD tinctures at Whole Foods Densfeld and Whole Foods Hillside. So definitely check out their wellness section, and you can find our 500 milligram and 1,000 milligram bottles of our tincture at both of those wellness departments in each of the Duluth co-op locations. So that's a really convenient way to purchase our products there. And then this is an image of our CBG tincture that we have. So the previous one was CBD rich. The purple labeled tinctures are CBG rich. And again, CBG has its own suite of therapeutic properties that I showed in that one slide, but definitely worth looking into all of its properties more in your own research. And our CBG extract tinctures come in 500 milligrams and 1,000 milligrams as well. You can find those on our website. And we also have our full spectrum hemp flower salve. So this is a relieving topical product. Our skin also has an endocannabinoid receptors across our entire skin, and that's what allows this formulation to work topically. So it provides a relief from the outside in, as opposed to the tinctures, which aren't ingestible, that sort of provides relief from the inside out, so to speak. And so the hemp flower salve can be used for targeted applications. So I'll use it, I'll have my wife rub it into my shoulders after a hard day of farming, or I'll use it for myself on sunburns or bug bites. We have a lot of customers that use it for like back aches and knee pains, or even arthritis. So everybody uses it for different reasons, but it's very multi-purpose and effective topical salve. So it's another way to get cannabinoids topically. And then also we have a line for our furry friends. So this is our CBD oil for pets, and we have bacon and grilled chicken flavors. This formulation has 300 milligrams per bottle, and so it's intended for cats and dogs, and it's dosed based on the body weight of the animal. So a 10-pound dog or cat would get about a quarter dropper, whereas a 40-pound dog, you might want to start at about one full dropper. And so these are really popular with our customers. We have a lot of returning customers who use it for their pets that have anxiety or that are really old and have a lot of different bodily aches. Those are the two main categories that our customers use the pet tinctures for. And so the pet tinctures are available on our website. And then we also have our hand-trimmed CBG and CBD flower available on our website as well, including different new strains that we grew this year. So you can check that out. And so our website, it's a little hard to read. I don't know if you guys can see that. It's really light for some reason, but it's northwoodsbotanicals.com. And you can also find us on social media at Instagram and Facebook. And I'll leave that up here. I'm going to turn my video back on. Can you guys see me? So thank you for listening to me ramble on all about hemp. There's so much to cover and so many different directions to go, but I hope that provided you guys with a good review and summary of the plant and a lot of launching points for your own research. And again, I really appreciate everybody's participation and attendance. And I would love to get into a little round of questions and answers. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming.
That was awesome. Thank you, Gil. I have no idea. I kind of guess I knew a little bit about why hemp was, essentially outlawed, but It was really fun to learn about the history of it.
Cool.
So for everybody, I know we had a couple of late attendees, so we are recording this. If you would like a copy of the recording, let me know. I just added my work email to the chat, so you can type that in and send me a message saying that you would like to have this. We're also going to put it on our YouTube site, so it'll get downloaded probably on Monday. For those people who would like to see this again, or maybe take screenshots of some of the images that Gil shared. At this time, would anybody like to unmute themselves and ask a question? Well, I think you were just so comprehensive, Gil, that nobody has anything.
Awesome. Well, I hope it was entertaining and enlightening, and I really appreciate everybody coming to attend. And I hope you learned something, and definitely check out our website, check out our products at the Duluth Co-ops.
We do have one question.
All right, let's hear it.
So Nick would like to ask, are there seed companies that you can recommend, and is production for personal processing / use allowed?
Sure. So, yeah, as I pointed out, one of the big challenges to farming hemp is you have to register with your state's agricultural department. So it is currently not legal for individuals to grow hemp in their own gardens, which I do think is silly, but it is what it is. And like I said, there's a whole permitting and licensing processing that you would look into in your state. And then once you're fully licensed, there are different seed companies out there and that serve industrial hemp farmers. So they won't sell to individuals, but they will sell to licensed hemp farmers. One company that we really like for a variety of reasons, they have great genetics, they have great ethics for their workers and how they farm. It's a great seed company. They're called Oregon Cbd. So the state Oregon and Cbd. And that's who we've worked with the last 2 years. And we really like them as a seed company, but it's definitely worth doing your research, and there's definitely dealers out there that are not very reputable, and so it's definitely worth doing your homework and seeing if you can even get references and even doing an interview with the company before purchasing.
Cool. Nick says thank you. Dee says thanks, lots of information. Feel like I took a crash course. Maybe later I would have some good questions. Well, you can check them out on Facebook. Yeah.
Well, and I should have included my email address, but you guys are all welcome to reach out any point. I'm at sales@northwoodsbotanicals.com. So feel free to email us any point too if you have any questions or follow-ups. It's sales@northwoodsbotanicals.com is how you can get a hold of us, or through Jennifer.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you again, Gil. That was wonderful. Really well done presentation. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your evening to spend it with us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And again, it's wholefoods.coop/classes if you want to view that full list. And my email address is jgilbertson@wholefoods.coop if you would like to have the recording, the link to the recording emailed to you. So take care. Have a wonderful night.
See ya.